On a Friday night in January, I was enjoying myself some Grizzlies Mavs when Luka Doncic did a very Luka Doncic thing, and somewhere in my brain it hit me. I'd seen this before, but where?
You don't know what it is, but it's there.
I quickly rewound the play, and watching it again, it hit me. This was Evolution. The pick and roll is one of the oldest plays in basketball, going back at least 100 years in some form, when legendary New York City coach Nat Holman described it in his seminal writings on basketball. But dribble drives weren't a common attack back then, so it's unlikely the modern version of the pick and roll was ever used much. Also, check out the range on that shot. Anyway, footage from the early days of the NBA is limited, but the first superstar who mastered this two-man game was probably Oscar Robertson in the 1960s. Oscar could come off the screen for a mid-range shot, or he could hit the roll man, and this one's almost modern-looking with staggered screens for the Big O, and he shoots a pocket pass through Bill Russell for a layup. Over the years, the pick and roll became a widely known play, but it was almost exclusively a two-man action, with the other three offensive players sort of idling away from the ball. This epic 1980s instructional video from the Celtics basically describes the two big men running it together in closed quarters around the foul line without any regard for the other players on the court. You see it in game action here, although there's a little flare screen for Dennis Johnson to add a cross-court passing read for Larry Bird. This is an empty side pick and roll with a perfect pocket pass, and listen to Bird tell Danny Ainge to clear out. That should pull Doc Rivers away from the play during the pick and roll, and this will be important in a moment when we jump ahead 35 years. Magic Johnson was known for his Showtime fast break, but by the late 80s he was a master of the primitive pick and roll game. The Lakers often set it on the wing, inside the three-point line, with three players on the other side of the paint, and Magic waited for defenders to commit to him before diming up the roller. This led to the cat and mouse reads we know today, albeit in tighter quarters. This defender sells out to the roll man, so Magic shoots it to a third player instead. Also, notice there are two Lakers on the far block, with no one in the far corner. So the Lakers realized if they slid a shooter out to that corner, it was yet another passing option to counter any help defense. On that play, he came around the screen toward the middle, but he would also reject the screen to punish defenders leaning into it, and if you went under one of these picks, he'd just feather in a long jumper, sometimes, yes, even a three-pointer. Of course, it was John Stockton and Karl Malone who made the pick and roll a household term in the 1990s, and they loved to run it on the wing like this with the side cleared out, starting just inside that three-point line. By the mid-90s, their spacing was a bit more modern, with two shooters spread behind the arc, and that screen is outside the three-point line, and when Stock forces help, he has an easy kick to an open corner shooter. Extra spacing made it harder to defend the ball handler. Notice the shooter floats to the corner, which makes this rotation a bit longer, and it's a cleaner layup. This still wasn't a pure spread pick and roll. Utah's center ducks back in the middle of the paint looking for a post-up, but that briefly occupies Malone's man, and that frees up Karl for another common option, the pick and pop jumper. These usually weren't three-pointers back then, but a ton of big men from Dirk Nowitzki to Hakeem Olajuwon would float into open jumpers as part of this two-man game. Another layer that Utah added was weak side movement, timing the on-ball pick with screening action away from the play to occupy weak side defenders. This time the defense overplays the cut, and so instead he floats to the corner, and that creates two kick-out passes for shooters off that original pick and roll. Other teams continue to attack out of screen and roll with a bit more space, especially with the rise of the three-point shot and the end of the illegal defense rules in the 2002 season. But It wasn't until Mike D'Antoni and Steve Nash stormed the league with 7 seconds or less that the spread pick and roll really took hold. Many people think of that Suns team as a transition offense, but it was largely their half-court system that revolutionized basketball, dotting the arc with shooters and spamming pick and rolls for Nash. All that spacing really opened up the lane for passes to the roller and for scoring opportunities if no one helped. These ball screens were set out above the three-point line, so if defenders went under, it was a Nash three-pointer, and as one of the greatest shooters ever, this sort of unlocked the pull-up three as a pick-and-roll weapon. This spread pick-and-roll gave the ball handler 5 options: shoot himself, hit the roller, hit the near corner if this defender helps, or if a weak side defender helps, skip it to a shooter for an open 3. That one was an above the break pass, but on this play, the low corner defender pinches way over, and that opens up the familiar 3-ball in the corner pocket off that pick and roll game. In the decade following 7 seconds or less, the number of plays finished from pick and roll rose steadily, but this synergy data undersells the complexity of the pick and roll game because of how many plays just start with a ball screen now. There was more isolation in the 2000s, but as teams became more efficient, they realized that the advantage from a ball screen was often larger than trying to isolate their best scorer. All that extra space and the prominence of pull-up three-point shooting caused defenses to chase ball handlers outside the three-point line, which in turn gave rise to the short roll pass. Effectively, this just transferred some of those spread pick and roll reads from the original ball handler to the roll man in a 4-on-3 situation. All of this created a kind of strategic arms race, with defenses trying to contain these pick and roll options without being compromised, and then offenses finding new ways to counter these defensive tactics. For instance, this screen then seal action deep in the paint is a way to punish drop defenders. Over the years, the speed of pick and rolls has also accelerated from a horse and buggy to the race car. Karl Malone used to walk into these picks very deliberately to avoid fouls, but players today will sprint into them and make split-second decisions at the point of the screen, maybe flipping the pick as a response to the defense to create a slight advantage for the ball handler. Today, that speed is exemplified by the ghost screen, sprinting toward a dribbler to set a pick, only just to keep on going. The point is to momentarily freeze the defense into thinking they need to set up for a screen or a switch, and that delay creates an opening for the offense. This itself is largely a response to all of the defensive switching from the last few years, which in itself was a response to the dominance of the spread pick and roll with all those three-point shooters. So it's safe to say there's a ton of subtle pick and roll warfare in the NBA today. Another trend in recent years has been the use of 2 screeners on the ball simultaneously. We saw this from Oscar Robertson over 50 years ago, so this isn't new, but today's teams run staggered screens in some form or another to create a roll man and popping shooter at the same time. Another deadly 3-man version that spread through the league was the Spain pick and roll, where a third player sets a screen on the original screener's defender and then usually pops to the 3-point line himself. And this comes in all kinds of variants and flavors, my favorite of which is probably running it on one side of the floor instead of down the middle. Bonus fact, the Lakers ran this after a timeout in 1991, so sometimes even the best plays are sitting right under our noses. This season, another popular screen is the so-called exit screen, which is away from the ball in the corner and is designed to create a cleaner shot on a corner 3-point attempt. And that brings us full circle back to that Friday night game in Memphis. This is a screen for the screener into a stagger, but the first pick is a ghost that effectively pops, the second screener picks and then rolls, and that whole thing is synced up with an exit screen to occupy the 2 remaining defenders so they can't help in the paint.
Impressive. Very nice.
We've already discussed a version of this play earlier this year where the Nuggets send a cutter off an exit screen, which allows Nikola Jokic to go to work. And tons of teams are running this now. Here's Charlotte running it with a single screen, and LaMelo Ball's great passing hits pay dirt there. And this version is a single ghost screen that freezes the second defender, and despite Chris Paul thinking a step ahead and switching, that exit screen still distracts Ayton just enough for the pass to get home. Same play against Atlanta, and this time John Collins does a nice job dropping with the roll man, but that's not enough resistance for LaMelo at the rim. Here's Milwaukee running their version of it. Two defenders converge to stop the layup, so that short roll pass to the other side is free, and that's another great look. Also, Trae Young was put in the screen, so he steps up toward the ball, which frees the roller. But when the Bucks ran it again on the very next play, a big man is guarding the screener, so he naturally drops back. Collins sags into the paint because he's seen this movie before, and suddenly there's no advantage, and they've neutralized the action. Personnel on both sides can make or break this play. Orlando tries it against a dropping big man, but Luka also stays in the paint because he doesn't need to chase Mo Bamba off that corner screen. Timing is also critical. The exit screen occurs well before the ball screen here, so this defender isn't preoccupied off the ball. The play is completely contained and ends in a touch foul. A really good switch can also slow down this play. The Suns run it off a stagger, and Maxi Kleber gets under the roll man on the switch, so Phoenix falls back on that exit screen and still gets a solid three-pointer anyway. And this backup option makes this play so deadly. Memphis copies Dallas, ghosts that first screen, but Brandon Clark misses the second screen, and Chicago has a dropping big off the ball, so that just creates an advantage on the perimeter for a little handoff into a three. There are also plenty of variations on this play. Charlotte starts with a common stagger away from the ball for this cutter, but he's really just the ghost screener. This man turns and becomes the roll man. The third player turns and sets the exit screen in the corner, and the whole thing works like a charm. Well, all the cool kids are running some version of this play. The Mavs might be the ones that go to it the most, and that makes sense given Luka Doncic's mastery of pick and roll reads and his ability to improvise out of these actions when they are well defended. Dallas has even used him as a roller, and that unlocks his short roll passing, and there aren't many defenders like Jaren Jackson who can break up that lob. They also have variations on the play. This time the first screener actually screens and then rolls right away, and the Grizzlies were caught completely off guard by that misdirection. They can also get into it off a basic fake handoff. Here's a middle screen, and behind the play, Wayne Ellington has no idea what's going on, and it's another free dunk. There will surely be more variations on the pick and roll in the future, to say nothing of handoffs, off-ball activity, and other intricacies we didn't cover here. But this latest link in the evolutionary chain combines some of the off-ball curls that were so popular in the 80s and 90s, along with the deadliness of the spread pick and roll that has taken over in the last decade. And I don't know about you, but I, for one, can't wait to see what they come up with next. If you want more content, head over to patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. The most recent video extra is a game breakdown of Jaren Jackson Jr. There are extra articles, a proprietary stats leaderboard that updates daily, and more. That's also the best way to directly support this channel. Let me know your thoughts on this one down below, and of course, I hope you are having a great day.